I doubt he's had time to add a photo of Einstein to his presentation, because we don't hold it against him. But now I'd like to introduce Matt Craig, Head of Performance and Value Management from BNY Mellon, who's going to talk through some of the challenges that an organisation faces when going agile. As I'm sure you'll see, there are a lot of similarities to those you would encounter in the IT-CMF adoption journey. So there's going to be a lot of learning here for us. So welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Sarah. I'll ignore it. All right. Notes. Well, that was an excellent session, Matt and Al. Thanks very much. And I think you gave me some more material to work with, which I always appreciate when I'm presenting. And good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I always really do enjoy coming to these IBI events and sharing what we've been doing. I won't actually be talking about what we're doing to drive agile adoption at BNY Mellon. What I'm going to be sharing with you is some of our experiences of applying agile principles and techniques to what we've done, mainly to drive capability improvement at BNY Mellon. Many of you in the room, but not everyone, is aware that we've been on this journey of capability improvement since around 2012, so it's been a number of years for us. And it's been an interesting experience on this journey in our sense of focus and how we've applied the IT-CMF, how we've driven improvement within BNY Mellon of our various capabilities. I'm going to share some of that experience with you, certainly not all of it, but I did want to share some of what we've done in terms of what we find to be useful from the agile and lean world along this journey. So with that, you might have seen the sort of session synopsis. I always like to remind myself, what did I promise to talk about, so that I sort of stay on message. But you can see here, right, this sort of improving an organization doesn't happen just because an executive says, hey, go forth and improve the organization. They might wish that that was true, but in our experience, that is absolutely not true. So, you know, we really do need to have an investment in our people, an investment in approaches and techniques, an investment in seeking good patterns and good knowledge from both internally and externally to the organization. Those are the kinds of things that we've certainly realized and discovered as we go. And again, this is, I mean, I'm probably not going to tell you anything new in the sense that a lot of what I'm going to share with you is very much available knowledge. But I am going to share with you some of our direct experience of applying some of these tools and techniques. Okay? So the first thing is just a little bit of context. BNY Mellon, we are a large global financial services institution. We're actually considered a globally, systemically important financial institution, which comes with the joy of more audit and regulatory oversight for us globally. So we take our jobs very seriously, both as an enterprise and certainly within IT. I operate within IT. Part of my job, you might have noticed sort of my title is the head of the Performance and Value Management Group. My job is to help understand the way we perform within IT to meet the needs of our business to create more value through our IT services, systems and products and so on. Now we've approached that in a lot of different ways, but it's really important for me to always reconnect with what's our vision and mission of the company and how does that meet the needs of our clients, how does that meet the needs of our employees. So improving lives through investing is kind of our vision statement. And I find that to be pretty motivating in the sense that it's not just about through investments in terms of financial instruments, right? I'm a great believer in us certainly investing in our team internally, and we've certainly expressed that and applied that in our journey with driving capability improvement, using the IT-CMF, adoption of agile techniques, all these kinds of things. Through those investments in people, processes, and so on, we realize returns, increased maturity, increased performance, those sorts of things. And again, you can see here the sort of invested in helping institutions and individuals achieve their full potential through expertise and servicing financial assets. So sort of that's the external face, but we take a lot of that seriously internally as well. So again, as I said, the senior executive, or Picard in this case, saying make it so, it really doesn't work that way. Or actually, it's not true to say it doesn't work that way. You know, for anyone who likes Star Trek, they obviously executed on and achieved a lot of missions. They had a lot of struggles along the way, but you know, when you think about a starship or a big ship or anything like that, you have structure, you have skill, you have training, you have a lot of things to help you execute on your mission. But when you have a mission like we did to drive organizational improvement of capabilities, which is a little bit of a different approach to regular organizational improvement, If you don't have the structure, if you don't have the skills, if you don't have the executive commitment, then saying make it so just doesn't work. So I'll share with you some of the things that we did learn that do help to make it work. So along those lines, this is a modified version actually of an intro slide that I shared at the summit, the IVI summit in Dallas in February 2013, so a number of years ago. And we were just starting on our IVI journey, our IT-CMF adoption journey at that point. I think we had signed up in August 2012, we did an assessment, we started getting into driving improvement, and we started discovering things very quickly. One of them was, the illustration on this slide is, that a lot of people say, well, what a really difficult job to transform an organisation because it's like turning a really big ship around. And I remember saying at the time, and this is still true, it's not like turning a big ship around. I'd love to have a big ship to turn around because there's a big steering wheel and I can just crank on that wheel and off we go, we start turning. It may take a while, but you'll get turned around. You know, to my mind, the reality of driving organisational improvement is really more about getting everyone paddling in the same direction. It's about having tens of thousands of people doing their own thing. Now, most of them are dedicated to the mission of the company, but if they're not connected with one another, if they're not understanding of the value that they provide within the context of how that creates value for clients, if they're not, and I'll talk about this on another slide coming down the track here, but it's that essence of being focused and purposeful towards achieving your mission as a team that's very different from just turning the big ship around. So again, a slide that we used back in 2013 was we started to build out something that we called our capability improvement toolkit. And the first thing we did is we put people at the center of the toolkit. It wasn't about process, it wasn't about the IT-CMF, it was about what can we do to leverage the strengths of our people within the organization primarily to go forth to manage our projects of change. So we look at this very much as a projectized effort, and we sort of evolved from that, and I'll show you what that looks like. But certainly we want to have an understanding, you know, where are we today? And that assessment of current state is a very important principle, certainly in terms of the realm of driving improvement. If you don't know where you are, it's very hard to go anywhere else, because you'll just keep kind of flying around in circles, pretending you're moving, when you're not really moving off of where you are because you don't understand where you are. So leading change was a very important principle and sort of set of techniques and skills that we want to invest in our people so that we can actually lead change and take things forward, not just talk about it, not just run assessments. And finally, of course, enabling success was important, so me and my team built tools and techniques and structure and process and communication and made sure we had executive support, a number of other things that we did to make sure that those teams that were trying to drive improvement were able to be successful, able to be seen to be successful and rewarded for that movement and for that success. So another piece of this, and again this is from 2013, so a number of years ago, is we realized that we aren't going to execute any kind of improvement activity driving improved capabilities, and we were very serious. We knew at the time it was a very, very optimistic, I'll say that, it's probably a gentle word to use, trying to improve many capabilities. We knew then that that was maybe biting off more than we could chew. So we also realized that wasn't going to happen in one fell swoop. There was no big bang approach. So we wanted to be iterative and incremental. And so we even at that point were starting to take concepts from Agile, from Scrum, for instance, and things like that, to sort of say, well, how do we apply improvement efforts? How do we take something like our CI, the Capability Improvement Program? How do we disseminate that across different capabilities? How do we engage people to sort of look at even breaking it down in terms of the structure of the IT-CMF to building blocks and practices, and you know, what does that mean in terms of actual implementation? And so then we sort of have this concept. For those of you who know the story, and I won't share it, so you'll have to ask me later, but the sense of chickens and pigs, we wanted the pigs, the people who are truly invested in driving change, the people who are really the practitioners of any domain, to be really invested in doing that work and driving change and avoid too much distraction from the chickens. So that was another principle that we sort of applied at that time. So there was, and we made some good progress. So the other thing I just want to sort of share with you, for those of you who may not be as familiar with things like, you know, I said I'd talk a little bit about Agile, is some of what are these Agile principles? What are some of the values? And a lot of this comes from the world of Lean. Matt was talking about the Toyota production system, even, you know, Japanese culture and things like that, helped us to drive and inform. I mean, Deming did as well. So a lot of this comes together. This environment of driving organizational improvement has a lot of common ground, and many of you will be familiar with that. But I thought it would be worth sharing Some of these things, both of these elements are actually found. If you're interested in more, if you're sort of curious about Agile and you don't know too much about it, I would definitely recommend two things. Look at the Agile Manifesto, that's nice and simple and easy. But also have a look at the Scrum Guide, go to scrum.org, and this is taking pieces out of the Scrum Guide, which are the values of Scrum, which is an approach, I think globally the easily most commonly adopted method to be Agile as an organization. So the first thing I'll start with are these values that are expressed in Scrum. And again, they didn't make this up. This isn't stuff that they said, hey, we're going to come up with this unique and different way of looking at what's valuable, but it was really more an expression of what was discovered to truly be useful, what values underpin success when you're trying to do incremental change and development in a complex environment. So the first one is this value of focus. I think I talked about this in the last summit that we had, that maybe the one before, but if you don't have a sense of focus or a sense of purpose, then whatever you do is likely to be diffused. Whatever you do is likely to be not as valuable because you aren't really focusing on achieving some kind of outcome. And I think even what Matt and Alan were talking about was a sense of, there's a sense of experimentation, but it's focused on trying to achieve some kind of outcome, some kind of benefit to be realized. So focus is important. Openness, it's a challenging thing. Look at us, we're a global financial institution, we're highly regulated, and what that often means is we're very sensitive about risk, we're very sensitive about information, security and things like that. So the culture is definitely a culture of, I'll tell you what you need to know when you need to know it. Whereas in an environment that's trying to be agile, we want to have a much more open and engaging culture. So that itself is a challenge, but to sort of express a value of wanting to be open, to sort of put more information out there, to certainly for people internally, with things that we do in terms of our IT-CMF assessments and those kinds of things, all of that is made available to everybody in the company, which is different than what we probably would have done in the past. Commitment, that's pretty important. We've been on this journey now for 5 years or close to it. And we continue to be committed to success. We continue to be committed to driving organizational change and improvement. And over that period of time, we have experienced a lot of changes in organizational, what are we focused on as an organization, different teams, different leadership, and so on. So this essence of commitment, I think, is very important that we continue on this mission. And it's not a single approach, it's not a single method, it's not even just about, say, the IT-CMF, but it is a commitment to improvement. Courage is another one which comes up in the sense that when you think about what we're doing, driving change is inherently difficult. You're going to get pushback, you're going to have friction, you're going to have resistance to change. That's just natural. I wanted to talk a bit more about some of the change stuff, but I won't do that here. So you've kind of got to have the courage to stand up and stand for what you're doing. That's something I've done, that's something many of our team leaders have done in each of their domains, to say there is a better way and we can achieve different practice through having the courage to speak up and speak against the way things are done around here. And finally, and very importantly, this issue of respect. Respect for people, respect for individuals, respect for everyone's skills, respect for that nobody has the one solution, nobody has the one insight that's the correct one. So we've all got to be very respectful of one another as we continue on this journey. And the final thing I just want to talk briefly, and I think we've seen a lot of this even this morning in the talk, and we had some IVI discussions yesterday, and I'm a great fan of these 3 pillars of Scrum as, again, sort of principles or pillars that are good to keep in mind. So transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And when we think about it, certainly in the context of the IT-CMF, there's a lot of activity that happens. This is one of my own little things, but with IDIs, there's a whole lot that the research group is doing, other organizations are doing, and yet that's not very transparent. And I'm a great advocate for saying we need to make a lot of that activity more transparent so that you can get more inspection by the community and therefore more adaptation. It comes back a lot to what Matt and Al were saying around sort of incremental and iterative design. Let's put it out there and let's try it out. And actually it was experience that I had with Laura and Louise and Anna in our research that we did with IVI the last sort of 18 months ago. A very similar approach to what these fellows did, and we discovered a great amount of value in having an adaptive approach to the development of simple artifacts that helped address real solutions that we were facing. So that was very good too. So we put a lot of these things into play as sort of principles within the program to start with. So as I said, this isn't about Agile, this isn't about adopting Scrum, but it's about leveraging some of these values and these pillars to think about what does it mean for us as we try to improve our organization. So the other thing that I discovered was the Scaled Agile framework, because we were starting to struggle, around about, I think in a sort of a year in or so, that the amount of change that was actually occurring was not happening at the pace that we wanted it to happen. We wanted to see more change occur, we wanted to see more outcomes visible, and that wasn't happening. So being a fan of Agile techniques, and I always like finding frameworks and things, I found the Scaled Agile framework, and I thought this looks useful for what we're doing. Not in terms of software development, but in terms of we have these multiple streams of effort trying to improve our organization in different ways, and yet they're not working cohesively together. They're all sort of relatively independent, sort of within somewhat of an umbrella of our improvement program, but other than that, there wasn't a lot of coherence. And so we wanted to address that, and looking at the Scaled Agile framework, I am not going to take you through this poster. This is available from, I think, scaleagileframework.com. It's a great thing to go and dig into and review if you're interested. But the main thing I wanted to point to is really at the bottom here, you can see that as we were already trying to take an Agile approach, what we had not had at that point in time was a sense of kind of release cycle. So in Scaled Agile, they talk about having program increments. And program increments are defined boundaries of time. At the moment, what we defined was sort of three-month cycles. So that teams could do whatever they wanted within the scope of the cycle, within the time box of the cycle, but they needed to publish something. Back to the artifact discussion, I think was a great point. We had the same kind of principles, like show us what you've done, show us how you've advanced the state of practice, or you've advanced tools and techniques within your domain. And again, when you think about the IT-CMF and across 36 different capabilities, that could be almost anything, but we wanted to see something tangible, and ideally we also wanted to see feedback from the beneficiaries of those developments. Hey, who's used your new tool, your new template, your new process, your new whatever it is. So we took this in essence and converted that into what does that mean for us at BNY Mellon in terms of capability improvement. And I think I presented this in the February-March forum in 2014, so we're now 3 years ago, and we said, look, let's implement more of a structured program for release of improvements, and we also, as part of this, aggregated the capabilities into our own model, a sort of a 6-part model, where we said, look, how do we drive continual improvement? What are the capabilities that help us with continual improvement types of action? And also, what are the capabilities that sort of enable everything else, things like knowledge management and people management and information management. And we said, okay, here's your release schedule, right? In February, May, August, and November, every year, you're going to show something. And we did the same for the others, for all of the 6 groups of teams. So each of the CCs was typically a team. In some cases, we had a bit of a mix and match. It was, one team for 2 or 3 CCs. But in general, it's almost a one-to-one. But you can see we defined strategic execution as a domain we cared about, and a number of CCs there. We defined financial management as a domain we cared about, and we said to those guys, March, June, September, December, what do you got? And the same thing for our value leadership and excellent service domains. And so you can see that for the organization, we would expect to see some outcome monthly. But for each team, they only had to show progress every 3 months. So that sort of was a fair balance of outcome continually, but also pace per team. And that worked reasonably well. So if I then look, I think I now have a sort of a quick review of, okay, well, how'd that work out for us as an organization in terms of maturity? And one of the things we can show, and this reflects a little bit on things that we talked earlier here about leadership and focus, that financial manageability, particularly cost of ownership and accounting and allocation, have been over the years our most improved domains. Now, we're already reasonably good at them, but also it's probably been one of the biggest focal points of the enterprise. It's been communicated in our investor reviews, general meetings, those kinds of things about, expense management as a good way to drive additional profitability. So it's been an enterprise topic, and therefore has been well supported in terms of improving our technology ability to manage total cost and managing accounting and allocation. But in the middle, kind of the middle of this, is to me the more interesting, which is we didn't necessarily have a clear enterprise focus on some of the topics. And I'm not mentioning what they are because it's not that important, but our overall improvement of maturity, as measured by our executive assessments over that period of time, is reflected in what I'm showing here: leadership, effective leadership of those domains, resource dedication, so teams and practitioners around those domains, executive support and communication, and an ongoing commitment to improving those domains. So really, again, these are sort of principles and factors at play that I recommend taking into account as you're trying to improve your own organisation. If you don't have those factors in play, you're unlikely to be very successful. And then the other thing that's a good message for us is that we do continue to improve our maturity of capabilities, even with relatively small amounts of resource dedication to this improvement effort. We continue to be on track, but it's a slow track, I will admit that. So with that, I'm now going to switch gears and sort of move forward to what have we been doing lately. How am I going for time?
We've got 10 minutes.
10, thank you, that gives me something to go. So what we've done more lately, those sort of first, I would say, couple of years of our journey were pretty much very focused on saying we are trying to improve the capabilities of BNY Mellon technology. And that was working reasonably well, but I'll tell you, one of the challenges that we faced was that there was no direct relationship. It comes back a little bit to sort of design thinking, is there wasn't an obvious relationship other than saying it would be good for us to be more mature. Maturity should equate to effectiveness and value delivery. So there was this sort of nominal model of saying it's a good thing to do, but there was no really obvious connection between capability improvement and existing organizational challenges. You know, what's our strategic intent, or what are sort of the key initiatives we had as a company? And that was, we started experiencing some resistance. You know, why are we trying to take people's time away from their day job to sort of improve practices in domain X, Y, or Z? And so what we then did, probably around about in the 2015 timeframe, was said, and actually we had been on this journey for many years, was said we need to refocus our energy to look at the services that technology provides within the organization, get increased clarity around those services, and make sure that those services are creating and delivering value that's more, if you will, customer and business centric. So we kind of took our eye away from, and our focus away from capabilities as a discrete entity to improve, and said let's get better at improving our services, and particularly customer facing services. But we also did that with the allowance that we wanted to keep doing capability improvement, and so I'll show you what that looked like. So firstly, some definitions, right? So what's a service? It means to create value, you know, create and deliver value. And I think this definition is straight out of ITIL, for those of you who are sort of service management fans. But it's a good thing in the sense, and I've always had the sense that service management is a great construct in the sense that when you think, if you think of an organization, if you put the customer at the top, if you're a swim lane person, the customer's always at the top. There's layers of the organization all the way down to sort of basic resources that are part of a value-adding equation that ends up delivering an outcome that customers care about. And the function of organizing all that value creation system is a service. You know, the point of managing the service is to ensure that all those parts are interconnected and working well together so that the customer consistently experiences a good outcome. So that's a good thing, we want to do that. And when you're talking about technology services, you realize that you're within the middle of that value creation system. You aren't typically the end experience, or there are certainly other value-added things that occur within our company that create value for clients. It's not just technology. And some of our technologists might believe it's just technology, but it's not. So we look at these two aspects of capabilities. And again, this is our own language within BNY Mellon, and I find it interesting because it can be a bit challenging. When we talk about capabilities, some people, particularly business leaders, they think a capability, and they're right to think so, a capability is the means, it's kind of our packaging of services, in my language, packaging of services to meet needs of clients. So capabilities being core business offerings, you know, our ability to execute funds transfers or do corporate trust work and those kinds of business domains. But then we have what we've called, you know, for our folks, foundational capabilities or functional capabilities, which are really the capabilities we see in the IT-CMF. So having to make that distinction is already a bit of a communications challenge, but we work through it. And the thing that we see is at the heart of both of these things, whether you're talking about services or capabilities, is the people, tools, and process triad. Is those things coming together as a value creation entity. And then the other thing that we do, and so, you know, so value's at the center of that, the ability to create value and have a purposeful insight into what is that value. But the other thing that we wanted to reinforce with our people was that this isn't enough. People, process, tools, it's helpful, but it's not sufficient. So the other thing we wanted to make sure we did do was to say, what is the purpose? So whether you're talking about a capability or talking about a service, what is the purpose of this? You might say that does equate to the value proposition, but it was important to us to make sure people were clear on what is that purpose. Because if you don't understand the purpose, then doing anything is going to be most likely a waste of time. The other thing that's important is integration. So I mentioned about thinking about a value creation system. Even if all the component parts of the system are wonderful, if they're not working well together, it's a useless system. Okay, so integration is really important. That's true for capabilities and it's true for services. And the other thing, of course, is insight, and this comes back a little bit to sort of the sense of experimentation. Where do we get insights from? We get insights from a lot of different places. We get insights from people, from teams, from customers, from monitoring systems. A lot of different things. You need to use insight to have an understanding of, are we achieving our purpose and delivering value? Okay? So we then said, okay, fine. So we're now focused on services, but we now have a subset of services called capability improvement services, which was, our old name was capability improvement teams, but now we can say, as a team, you are responsible for the service of doing these three things, right? And I'll just bring them up, right? Number one, deliver service. Like if you are the PMO, your service is to help oversee the management of projects, to be simple about it. So that's, and if that's all you're doing, then what I would say is you're offering a professional service. You're offering something that's valuable in and of itself. You're helping to manage a portfolio of projects, and that's fine. But if you're a capability improvement service, then you're doing that, but you're also doing these other two things. You're supporting the capability in practice across the organization, outside of your direct reporting chain, and you're also driving improvement of that capability across the organization. And as you can see at the bottom, it's about engaging practitioners across the organization as constituent contributors to that improvement, not just trying to do it yourself. Okay, so that was pretty important. My cheat slides have gone away on me. Now I'm in trouble. I knew what was coming until now. So that was sort of at the level of the organisational level of services. But the other thing that we're trying to do, and you probably got some of this already from me, is that we really are invested in trying to develop what I call positive influences within the organisation. So I'm going to see if this builds properly. So the first thing, as I mentioned, is what I think of as this vertical dimension, this value-centric, customer-centric dimension of focus. So if you're an individual, so I'm using this little circle as sort of, if this is a person. So the person needs to be focused on creating customer value. They need to also be focused on how do they integrate with others within their service chain to create that value, and what does that mean? So if I'm a project manager, how am I making sure that I'm executing projects to meet the needs of the end client, for instance? But also, what we want them to do is not just act within the domain of their service. We expect all of our professionals to act as professionals, and therefore to also have a horizontal focus, which I would say is a capability focus, where we're looking at what is your function within the organization, the function of maybe you're an Agile leader or a developer or a DBA, whatever you are. There are others that express that function within the organization that are not within your service. So are you engaged with them, and are you developing your own individual skills so that you can both help improve the value creation within your silo, within your service, but also share that knowledge and disseminate and advance practice within the organization horizontally across your domain, okay? And so we're sort of using this as an operating principle. We believe if this happens, we therefore create, if you will, a stronger mesh of organizational function where we're certainly continue to be customer-centric, but also we have this horizontal ability to improve our capability maturity. And both of those together should create more organizational value. And you can kind of see the promise here is the more that we do this kind of work and say, look, we definitely want to improve services, we want to improve the output and the value of those services, at the same time as whatever your function is, whatever your profession is, make sure that you're acting in a professional way to engage with other professionals in your domain and help drive or lift the tide of maturity and improvement for the organization. So I think I just have a couple of last slides. Oh, that's right. So these next couple are around, I mentioned insights just earlier. It's really important for us not to use just one single technique to understand our own performance. And so one of the things I've actually done since 2011, so I started doing this before we got into IT-CMF, was developed and have run on a yearly basis a survey of mainly business leaders within the enterprise around their expectations and their satisfaction with technology services. And the feedback that we've gotten from that survey has always been, very helpful in informing the leadership team as to where people should pay attention, what should we be driving improvement of, and that's been not always the same as the feedback we get from the IT-CMF assessments, but it has been supportive and has sort of given us another angle of approach. And the other thing that's important is, and I think Matt was talking about this, you can't just have an aggregate blanket approach. You can't just say, here's the results for everybody, for a global organization, serving 100 markets with over 50,000 people. It doesn't work that way. We have local variation, both in terms of geography and also in terms of different lines of business, have different experiences and different needs and different priorities. So we take that and we sort of put that through our analytics and reporting so that we can provide contextually useful information to leadership teams to make a difference. And again, this is all about focusing on the needs of our business constituents, with the implication that that's going to help us meet the needs of our clients. And the other piece of that is that we do want to make sure we have a balanced response so that we have both local change, local improvement per team, per service, per geography, but also, me and my team are also looking at how we can capture that as systemic improvements for sort of enterprise change as well. So we need to do both of those things. It's no good to only have local improvements if those local improvements aren't at some point helping to create more systemic improvements within the organisation. So, to finish, firstly, develop and unleash your talent. I think it's a really important principle. I think that Agile techniques really support that greatly. So, looking at how can we encourage learning, how can we encourage experimentation, and how can we discover and leverage the skills of our professionals throughout the organisation. And a lot of these things obviously lend themselves to this domain of driving continual improvement within the company. Committing to change, and commitment is critical. And it doesn't always have to be executive commitment. If you have just a handful of people that are just dedicated, and you'll have these people within your organisation. They just can't help themselves. They want to continue driving improvement. Find them, engage them, keep them involved, and also continue trying to keep the executives involved as you go through changes in leadership and so on, and you will get there over time. Okay? Some of these other things around specific skills like change leadership and so on are very important. It's easy to go wrong. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to sort of make no progress for a lot of different reasons. So things like change leadership competence are very important. And there's many tools and techniques that you need to bring on board and bring into your sort of change team. But again, you want to share the load. And lastly, of course, this voice of the customer and the voice of the employee. I'm not a believer in saying the customer is always right, in the sense that there are multiple perspectives on what's going on, and I think we need to sort of think thoughtful about who are the key stakeholder groups that need to have a say, and don't just let them have a say. Let them and have them be involved in the solution. Right? Make sure that whoever's giving you feedback is also an active participant in driving some kind of solution. Okay? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt, and I'll chat to you later about the chicken and pig story. Look forward to hearing about that. But really interesting to see the journey, so thank you very much for that.